Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Shakespearean Shrew Abroad. I am your Shakespearean Shrew, Karen Feiner, lover of all things bard and literature and theater and the weird stuff in between. And this is a decorum be damned entrance into all of that. So today I am once again talking with Lance Marsh, head of performance and professor at Oklahoma City University. And you are directing another show. You've been very busy. This time you're directing a reading at Oklahoma Shakespeare in the Park of the Rover. And so I'm very excited to talk a little bit about what that is going to entail. But first, before we even get into that, thank you so much for being on the show again.
You're welcome. It's always a joy to talk to you, Karen.
So, a reading. So this one is not necessarily a full performance. What, by your definition, or how you're going to define it for this production, how are you defining a reading?
Well, I'm going to call it a staged reading, as opposed to just a reading. It's not just going to be people sitting around a table reading a piece of text. They're going to be getting up. There are going to be some staged elements to it, but books are always going to be in hand. There's a value to doing readings, I think, in that they can be done more cheaply. They can be done in a very short amount of rehearsal time. A fully fledged Shakespeare production, if you're going to do it right, still should take 4 to 6 weeks of rehearsal. We're going to do 6 days of rehearsal and put this thing up. So, you know what I mean? You can get, and the other, I think, value of a reading is that there are some plays, there's a history of plays that are meant not to be staged, but to be read. Plays as literature, they used to call them closet dramas. Back during the Roman Empire, there was a whole series of plays that were being written that weren't necessarily meant to be staged. Now, the Rover wasn't written for that. It was written to be staged. But it's a play that is challenging to stage for a lot of reasons. And so and I think it's important literature. So it's a way for us to get actors and audiences to experience in real time literature that's sometimes difficult to stage otherwise. So in our production, there'll be music stands. The actors will be all around the theater. There'll be some entrances and some exits. There's going to be a lot of music transitionally. We'll talk about, because I'm not setting it in the time period, I'm moving it to a different time. So there's a whole thing. But a reading generally is an audience gets to come in and hear a bunch of really talented actors who are making some really strong acting choices, but are still reading them from the script rather than having them memorized.
Which is really exciting and an interesting challenge. I just realized that I'm going to blind people with that.
You're good.
It's a really interesting challenge for these actors to still keep it as engaging, reading from these scripts and doing it in like you said, 6 days.
Right.
That's quite the challenge.
Well, and this is a really interesting style because there are a lot of theatrical asides that in this style, the characters are speaking to one another and then we'll turn to the audience and go, hey, did you see what she did? And so there's going to be, even with the reading being the prevalent production style, there's going to be a lot of interplay between audience and actor in this reading.
So this, like you said, this production is definitely meant for the stage. In fact, it is by, at least as far as we know, the first female playwright, Aphra Behn. And so with that element of it, you talked about changing the setting, which I think is really fun because Aphra Behn actually, she adapted this production from Thomas Killigrew's Tommaso.
Right.
And so he adapted it from the Inquisition to Carnival, which
Right.
actually fits really well with our timing right now.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah, right. Well said.
and I always thought that was intentional because it's so closely connected to what Shakespeare did, where he tended to
Absolutely.
set plays in these times of upheaval, which is exactly what Carnival is.
Right.
So, how are you changing it, and when are you changing your setting to, and how does it fit with that idea?
Well, yeah, I mean, as somebody who's has had the real luck to get to direct a lot of Shakespeare, I'm used to asking a series of questions about where are you going to set a Shakespeare play, and I know, God forbid, we set a Shakespeare play when Shakespeare set them. You never see that anymore. Like as an actor and as a director, I can't remember the last time I saw pumpkin trousers on stage, and I'm really longing for a production like that. But that having been said, the transferring of a classical piece of text to a maybe a revelatory time period closer to the audience's understanding is a pretty time honored tradition. So I started by asking a couple questions about the play. Um, it, if Aphra Behn is the first professional female playwright. There are certainly female playwrights in the Western canon before her, but nobody was making any money doing it. She made money doing it, so she's significant because of that. Um, it, this is it could be at least seen as an early feminist artifact. So we're just going to start with that. That's where I'm starting. Now, there's a
Right.
lot of problematic stuff in the play, and I'm sure we're going to get around to talking about that.
Oh, we
But
are.
but she definitely at least centers a woman and a woman choosing her own destiny in spite of patriarchal pressures and norms, and doing so at a time and a place where the rules were already more fragile or non-existent, which is in the midst of Carnival. So I thought, what is this Carnival? It's a bunch of young kids wandering around trying to get laid. Like this is what this play is about, right? And I thought, well, what is that but spring break? And then I started looking at when was spring break its most spring breaky. So I'm looking at the early MTV period, because you sort of feel like that was where things were. And I did a little research, and I didn't know this until I started looking. But there's a particular summer that kind of broke spring break. It was, and you see, you don't know this bit of history either, so I'm going to. So in the summer of 1985, Fort Lauderdale was the absolute spring break pinnacle, and in that summer, spring break was so raucous that it basically broke Fort Lauderdale, and the Fort Lauderdale government passed a bunch of laws that winter afterwards that curtailed a lot of the excess, and spring break moved elsewhere as its center point. So 1985 in Fort Lauderdale felt like the most carnival. And then you look at the middle of the 1980s and you look at pop music, because I love music, and I knew that anytime you move a play, you want to use the music of the time period. The mid 1980s and feminist icons, it's only a couple of years after Girls Just Want to Have Fun. 1985 was when Aretha Franklin and the Eurythmics put out Sisters Are Doing It for Themselves. Madonna is in one of the many heights of her recording career at this point. So 1985, Spring Break, Fort Lauderdale is where we're setting the play, sort of at the surge of third wave feminism.
That's freaking perfect. Uh, I love that so much. I think Aphra Behn would love that
I
so much.
kind of think she would. Yeah, I kind of think she would.
It's because her history is fascinating, right? The fact that, she basically, her family was taken to Suriname by her father. He died there. They got shipped back without really a provider. She got married, but nobody really can find the guy that she married. So there's two rumors. One, she got married to Mr. Behn and he immediately died of the plague that hit soon after. Or two, she made him up in order to give herself some credibility as a female writer. I'm kind of hoping for the latter.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
But she, he went to debtor's prison after she was a spy. There's a lot of maybes, probablys, and perhapses with her. So she's very similar to Shakespeare in that way as well. But did go to debtor's prison, came out and was like, screw this, I'm making my own money. And turned to writing to make her money. And that's where these plays kind of all came from. And I always think it's so interesting because she basically has to start her play and end her play saying, look, I know you all are telling me that I ripped this from Killigrew, but I didn't. Like I adapted. And no male playwright at the time had to do that. Like Shakespeare straight up ripped Merchant of Venice, and that whole plot line.
Right.
And was like, I'm going to borrow this. And then he created more in-depth characters, which is exactly what she does.
Right.
Right? He humanized Shylock in that moment. And I would say that she humanizes Angelica. I would say that that's the character in this play where in the original, it's just, oh, she's a whore. She's a fallen woman.
Right.
And then she comes in and is like, why? Why is she in that position? Why is she having to do what she has to do?
Yeah.
And so, again, just like Shylock, I would say he forces us to question the original narrative.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And Shakespeare was so good at understanding and humanizing the other. You think about the role of women during Shakespeare's time period, and you think about all the kick-ass women that Shakespeare wrote. Both Shylock and Othello are deeply humaned versions of some pretty surprising others for the Elizabethans. I think the thing with Behn is she's the other.
Yes.
So she's writing not just to de-other some other, but herself and her people, if that makes any sort of sense. And
It
so,
absolutely does.
yeah. So this feels like a passion project for her. It feels like a political statement, as much as it is an attempt to create a funny play that fits in the world that she's writing for that will make her some cash.
Yeah. And I mean, again, I'm a nerd. I can't help it. But you can't help but see the similarities because Shakespeare, with being part of the theater, was looked down on, and they were always called, the theaters were called the synagogues of Satan, right? So that whole idea of being connected to a Jew, and somehow all of a sudden Shylock emerges, and we finally see him humanized, right? Not to say that he's not flawed, but
No.
humanized. And then I think it's a very similar thing that she's doing because as a woman in theater, she was immediately considered a prostitute. Like,
Right.
that's what women on the stage were considered at that time because we're talking the Reformation where women were first on the stage.
Right.
And so I think a lot of Angelica is, you judge me? Okay. Like, here's judge this.
Well, and I also think that you brought up a good point that we look at Shakespeare humanizing Shylock or Othello, and we go, and it's easy to go, yeah, he did, but not as much as we would have liked to him to do it today. But the thing is, he wasn't writing today. He was writing in a very, so when you're looking at classical plays and you're looking at how they're advancing certain groups, you can't make the starting point be
No.
now, although now becoming more regressive as it is. Maybe you could use now a little bit, but we won't get into that. I won't get. But if you look at the baseline, right? So you're talking about Shylock. Look at what Marlowe did with Barabbas and the Jew of Malta, who was just a two-dimensional baby killing monster.
Yeah.
And that was the norm of that depiction of that group of Jews at this time period. And then look at where Shakespeare puts Shylock. And so much so that it still resonates today, right? And so I think you can make the same argument about this play, that there are some parts of this play, you were saying before we got started that you went back and looked at your notes from when you first read it, and there were some oogie moments, and there are some oogie moments in this play. And I will let anybody who's listening, who's thinking about coming to the reading, know that I have excised a fair amount of the ooginess from it, and it's not that hard to do, it really isn't. But in a culture where the baseline is this, Behn is moving the baseline so far from that. But if we compare it to today, we lose the sense of just how much mobility is happening, cultural mobility is happening in a play like this.
Although these women are baller.
Yeah, yeah,
One, it opens with the women.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah, how great is that, right? And throwing caution to the wind. Not only are we going to let women start the play, but a girl who's destined to become a nun is talking smack in a way, like right off the bat. It's like, wow. So the church is getting leveled at this point too.
And it is so interesting because throughout the entire play, the church is constantly used as kind of a pseudonym. Like it is constantly used as a stand-in where they're talking about habits. Oh, they're talking about costumes for carnival. They're talking about the nunnery. Oh, they're actually talking about brothels. They're talking, and you're just like,
Right.
oh, interesting. So
Yeah.
the double entendres that exist that are
Right.
constantly comparing the religious to the carnal is throughout this entire play. It's pervasive.
Right.
And so that is incredibly fun to pay attention to as you're listening for the jokes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. There are many. But, and I think what you talked about, and I want to come back to it, is like, you took out some of you call them oogie moments. And so at this point, dear listeners, one, just a trigger warning. We are going to be talking about some very sensitive material moving forward. Just because that is what Aphra Behn wrote about, and it was the position that women were in, maybe are in.
Yeah.
And so it's important that we discuss it. Two, if you don't want to hear anything about the plot, it was written in the 17th century, go catch up. But we are going to talk a little bit about the plot. And so maybe it will even help some of you as you are going to see the production if you get a chance to see it. So what we start out with are two sisters. And so with these two women, we've got one woman who is being forced into marriage with a man that men, the brother and father want her to marry two different men, neither of whom she wants to marry.
Right.
And then her sister, who has been pledged to the church as a nun and does not want to be a nun. She is the least nun-like.
I would say that is true. Helena might be the least nunnable character you've ever met.
I really like Nunnable. That's the one we're going with.
Okay.
And so as we're going through this production, we're dealing with one, the path that is put out for these women, right? The path for these women are determined. And we'll talk about Angelica because she's my third woman
Right.
who's kind of put into this situation. But with these women, they are told who, where they're going, who to marry, etc. And it's their chance using Carnival to upheave the social system and find a way to get what they want. Which, again, go women. But along the way,
Right.
and Florinda gets assaulted 4 times. One time before the play begins,
Right.
which is how she meets the man that she wants to be with.
Right.
And then within the play, she gets assaulted 3 other times.
Yeah.
If I was her, I'd join a nunnery. Like, it is awful.
Yeah.
But the reasons for each of these occasions, one, he was just so drunk. He was like, oh, I'm drunk. You're here. You're out at nighttime. Obviously, you want this.
Right.
Rule number 2, you're looking at me. You're looking at me, so you must want me. Third, I'm really pissed off at women as a sex. And so since all women are the same, I'm going to get my revenge on the woman that scorned me by taking it out on you.
But add to that one even more. And you showed up in my house unannounced and uninvited, and mix into all of that the fact that because it's Carnival, everybody's wearing masks. So you can't see the quality, the standing, the class of the woman. And because there are a lot of loose women on the street, there is that's out there. That's in play, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's like they can't distinguish between the virgin and the whore. And so there's this play between these categories, right, of women where you're either one or the other. And in addition to that, you're getting kind of merged into, oh, all women are the same.
Well, and if you were a proper woman, you wouldn't be alone on the street. You'd have a male protecting you. You would have, right? Like that's the norm of the upper class society in Naples. So then the inference is, again, I'm not defending the men and these assaults, but there is that play. It's interesting. You were talking about this. I'll just throw this in because I just love this little factoid that there are a lot of places where sort of courtesans and upper class women dress and act so similarly that one can't tell the difference. And one of those places was Venice at the time period that Shakespeare was writing and afterwards. Lord Byron said of Venetian women that the upper class women acted worse than the prostitutes on the streets, and that you couldn't tell the difference when you were walking down the street who was who. So this idea of class and access and identity gets very muddled during a time of misrule like Carnival.
Yeah. And the other thing is like, you're thinking about Carnival, you're thinking about 17th century, and then you read this play and you're going, why am I thinking about 21st century society,
Right.
Where it's like, oh, you looked at me. Why are you dressed like that?
Right.
You were, why would you put yourself in that position?
Yeah.
And so it still resonates so strongly. But I think part of the reason why it doesn't get produced as much is because it is so hard to hear and to see these situations. And then, of course they have the moments of, you know, oh, you tried to rape my fiance, or my hopefully fiance. Oh, he didn't mean to, he was drunk, forgive him. Right? And you're just going, no. Or
Yeah,
like at
but you get this in Shakespeare too, right? You get
oh,
to the end of the end of Two Giants, and you're like, how are we even? What are we? The end of All's Well That Ends Well, which doesn't end well at all. And I mean, if you're looking at Helena in that play, you're like, run, girl, do not walk away from this turd.
no, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, toxic relationships. There are, yeah,
yeah,
toxic relationships abound. But again, those are the options, right?
yeah,
The option is to be Angelica, whose husband died, and therefore her only skill set that she had that was worth something that men would pay for was her body. So she was put into a position where she had to prostitute herself in order to survive. And then you've got Helena, who it's like, okay, you either have to get married and trick your way out of it, or you're becoming a nun. Right. And then you've got Florinda, who, you know, wants to marry the guy who is her protector, who has shown that he's willing to stand up for her, but instead is being forced into one of the men who will pay more for her.
right.
And so, yeah, was it hard? Were you able to take out the more traumatic moments
Yeah.
with still keeping that element intact?
Yeah, I believe I have. Yeah, I believe I have. It's a long play, so I was going to cut it anyway, and I have. Some of the language, much of the language is still really great. Some of it's a little funky, and so I've done some altering in a few places. But mostly what I did was cut for brevity and also cut around the more traumatic chunks of the Florinda story.
Mhm.
So, there's that. But I have kept all of the really important sort of core events
Yeah.
to telling the story. So yeah, I feel like I feel like it for an audience of today's sensibilities, there isn't going to be anything that is truly triggering.
Yeah.
There'll be one or two places where you're like, "Ooh, that's a little itchy,"
Yeah.
but that should be about it.
I mean, those moments are, to me, kind of important to keep a few of those itchy moments,
Yeah,
those moments where you're uncomfortable.
yeah. Well, I mean, the thing about Carnival is that I think we want to think about it as, um, a time of joyous misrule and rule breaking and all that stuff. But nothing is ever an unmixed bag, right? When you take out all of the rules, it means that our baser natures are allowed to thrive in a way that, and one might make a political case about a certain country in the world right now, and a time period where baser natures are being allowed to thrive. I won't make the comparison, but that having been said, um, if you go out into Carnival to break the rules, there is a lawless state which allows the baser natures of some people to come. And I think one of the things that comes out of this play is that we see who we learn a lot about the truth about who these characters are when they go out into Carnival. It's funny that they put on a mask in order to find themselves.
Absolutely. But when you're already almost forced into a mask by society,
Right.
is that actually your opportunity to be
Yeah,
yourself?
yeah. And there's the moment where Helena finally takes off her mask and shows her face to Wilmore, that you're just sort of like, oh, that's a meaningful gesture.
Yeah. And yeah, I love this play because there is that element of women power, but like you said, it's women power for the 17th century. So this play will not pass the Bechdel test.
No,
Yes, women have a lot of lines, but
yeah,
they are all about men.
yeah, right. Yeah.
You-
Although I will say that, and I totally agree with all of that, but there's the fact that Angelica is so deeply humanized and falls in love and becomes vengeful and is a real person is, I think, a huge step for this time period. There's another woman too to be talked about, I think, which working on the reading has really made this character jump out at me. There's a cousin, Valeria, who is sort of another one of these, girls just want to have fun girls. And so it's the trio of them, Helena, um, Valeria and Florinda, and they all end up with a crazy boy at the end. And they got to choose them. All three got choice. And the idea of getting to choose, even if it's not the perfect set of choices that are available to you, but women getting to choose feels like an incredibly strong statement that Aphra Behn is making in this play.
Absolutely. Agency. And the
Yes.
fact that even Angelica gets agency at the end,
Mm-hmm.
where she gets to choose whether or not, one, she lets somebody else fight her battles and
Right.
pull the trigger for her,
Literally.
literally, or if she can make the choice and have the choice to walk away.
Right.
And so I think all of the women, I think you're absolutely right, except for, of course,
Lucetta.
Lucetta and
Right.
the nurse who ends up in a closet.
Oh yeah. Callus. Yeah.
We'll just throw her in here and lock the
Yeah,
door.
yeah, yeah. Well, she's a servant, so I mean, we're not gonna. It's still a class world, even if it's a girl world. It's all the girls are of a
But
class.
the fact that Valeria did that, I mean, because she's a cousin, not necessarily a direct relation, but just like a close, intimate of the girls. For
Right,
her to do that,
right.
that was ballsy.
Was yeah,
Like you can't go back. Like
right.
unless we do this, you can't go back there. And then, Helena, of course, she is willing to do whatever it takes. Um, I have to say, she's my favorite.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Well, and it's interesting. The play is called The Rover, and we're certainly led to believe that the Rover is Wilmore, right? The sort of leader of the gang. But I don't think that's who the Rover is. I think Helena's the Rover, don't you?
I absolutely do. I absolutely do.
And
Uh,
there's something about the coming together of them at the end that you're like, girl, how could you forgive him? But at the same point, she says, you know what? I see you and I'm like you. And I like that I'm like you. And I know we're gonna work not because of all the things that you are that are seen as noble, but all the things that are maybe ignoble that you and I share. That
right.
means we're gonna be that couple. But at least I know it's gonna work because I get you, I see you, and I see myself in you, and that feels incredibly progressive for the time period too.
It does. Yeah. I am not necessarily we'll talk more about this. I'm talking to some of your other actors and we'll talk more about this, but it is interesting because there's the good men,
Yeah,
the the bad boys,
yeah,
and the bad men.
yes,
And that line gets a little blurry throughout the play where you're
it
just like,
does.
ooh, like,
Yeah,
at the end, Florinda is in a position where she basically has to forgive Wilmore, um, and
And
uh,
Blunt.
and Blunt, both of her accosters.
Right.
And you're just like, oh no. And you push back against it so much.
Yeah.
But at the same time, again, it makes you feel for Aphra Behn because that is the world he lives in,
Yeah.
right? Where he has to keep living in it. And Florinda has to keep living in that world. And in order to do so, she has to make compromises. She has to, forgive things that are not necessarily something that we would want to forgive.
Right.
And I think the same thing with Helena, right? With Wilmore, where it's
Yeah.
like, I could hold this against you, but I think it's going to be more damaging to me than it is to you. So,
Right. No, I think that's right. And Blunt, I have to say, looking at this, like if you set this play in 2026, Blunt is an incel. Blunt is like we get who Blunt is. He fits perfectly into the world we're living in right now, right?
I know, alas. Uh,
Alas.
but yes, so I don't remember what other questions I wanted to. I mean, and there are just some great lines in this one. Because like you said, Helena, like she also feels to me very modern, where she'll just say it as she thinks it, she thinks it is.
Sure.
But oh yeah, Wilmore, he's the one who tells Angelica, poor as I am, I would not sell myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you get that moment of like, oh, privilege because you're a man, and
Right. Well, and Angelica's response is brilliant. She says, "Well, but then don't you sell yourself to the woman with the highest dowry? Like you're not don't be
think you're
don't be
special.
like that, right?
Yeah,
Like the whole system, which frankly you men set up, sells all of us, not just me. I'm just choosing my sale price rather than being told what it is by somebody else.
yeah.
And but yeah, that there is that exchange is really fun. You're thinking about quotable lines. Wilmore says, "There's no true sinner like a young saint."
Yeah.
Like the ones who are running away from the convent are the dirtiest people you're going to run. You know what I mean? And he's very interesting. I want to talk a little bit, if you don't mind, to again the adaptation of
Oh,
it to the time
absolutely.
period had another set of challenges in how to deal with class. Um, uh, Behn is writing about a time period where King Charles II, although he's not king yet, but Charles and his cavaliers have been kicked out of England by Cromwell, and they're basically these poor, sort of starving immigrants in other people's countries. So the English at this time period, these English gents, are known to be poor and sort of downtrodden and whatnot. Whereas the Spanish, it's this place set in Naples, but it's a Spanish colony at this point. So the Spanish nobility, Don Pedro, Don Antonio, are sort of the upper class, right? And so when I was thinking about how do we deal with that separation of nationality and class in our 1985 spring break in Fort Lauderdale? I thought about American class. And so the Spaniards are all Ivy League guys. They're Yaleys and Harvardies. Whereas the English are a bunch of poor state school kids who just heard about spring break, but don't have any money, but just came to see what they could get away with. So they're basically frat boys from OU.
So how do you convey that?
Well, in a reading, you have a narrator who's going to talk about all the action, and I've given the narrator some pretty fun stuff to talk about in translation of this. But I also think it can be done with costume. I think the Spaniards, the Ivy League boys, will be dressed differently than our poor OU boys will be. So there may be some boomer gear as part of the we're still sort of working that out,
That's
but
fun.
but thinking about it in terms of that allows us to keep the class distinctions pretty rigid, even in translating it to a completely different country at a completely different time period. And I think as many of the places as you can move things parallel to the play into the new time period, the better. And when you're putting something in a new time period, there's no 100% accurate translation.
Yeah.
So one of the things you do as a director is you go, what are the parts of the play that I really want to translate? Then find a period where those translate accurately and hope the rest of it doesn't totally blow you know what I mean? Blow the logic of the play out the window.
So I have to ask if you left in the part about the measuring swords, and if so, what are they measuring?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of sword fighting in this play, and it is, in fact, one of the things that. But we actually make a joke about it in the play. Right? The first sword fight happens, and the narrator goes, basically, deal with it to the audience, and then we move on. I kept the joke about measuring the swords because there's a crucial plot point that you sort of can't do without, and it's such a raucous play about sex and sexuality that literal sword measuring is happening in the play, which to me I just find hysterical beyond belief.
Me too. And then thinking about it in terms of like spring break, just
Oh
killing
yeah, right.
myself.
Like there's a bunch of courtesans who show up in the first scene with the state school boys, and they're just coming from a wet t-shirt contest. And because I'm not staging it, I can say anything I want, and the audience can use their imaginations to fill any of that in. But yeah, it's if you go back and you look at video. I was in college in 1985, but I wasn't a spring break going kind of guy, so I don't know. But I remember those MTV
Oh yeah.
summer spring break kind of bacchanalian experiences that you just like, and those are sort of indelibly printed in my understanding of the culture of the time, and feels like what I think Carnival feels like in this play.
Well, and it's so fun because like here we still celebrate Carnival. So
Right.
I just got done celebrating Carnival like a couple weeks ago where it's just big parades and everyone's drinking and like just chaos in the streets. Um, and so it's a really good change up. I think it fits so well and
Right.
I am so excited for it. How are you how is casting similar or different based on readings versus performance?
Uh, Well, if it was going to be like a radio play, you would cast on voice type more than anything else. But because it's a staged reading, I don't really feel like I
Similar.
cast a whole lot differently. The reading series is something that Oklahoma Shakespeare in the Park is doing new this year.
Mhm.
And when Tyler was talking about his concept for it, um, I had been pitching, to be honest, this came out of a long conversation that Tyler and I've had about this play and about possibly putting it on the main stage. And he said, well, I need to see it in some other form first to make sure. So it's almost like in a weird sort of way, this started out as a kind of proof of concept kind of exercise that then morphed into the point of it. I'm not sure we'll ever put it on the main stage. Although with this 1985 spring break idea, it could be really fun.
It could.
But there are plays that are that I think it's important for a classical theater to be presenting to its audience. Some of those plays aren't necessarily the best plays for a lot of reasons, and many of them varied, to produce fully. So that's sort of how this whole reading concept came up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and Aphra Behn, I feel like so few people know who she is. You know, and Virginia Woolf said about her, all women together ought to let flowers fall over her tomb. For it was she who, what was it? For it was she who earned them the right to speak their mind. And so, I mean, everything that we've talked about, it's not easy. It's not clean.
No.
Play is, like you said, I have yuck written in my marginalia from undergrad where I was just like, whoa.
Right.
But I think that's because it's what it was and what it is. You know, I think that it's still yuck, but that doesn't make it any less real, and it doesn't make it any less important to put women's stories and issues on the stage when it seems like so many times the plays begin and end with men.
Yeah.
You know, and the women are the characters on the side who help move the story along, or, you know, and even Shakespeare, who has written amazing women, the amount of lines that they get, while they're brilliant, are still minimal. And so to see women have the opportunity to take center stage and showcase the issues, I mean, it does seem very important. And like you said, for a classical theater program to put forward those kinds of voices.
Yeah. No, I think so. It's interesting. You bring up the fact, if you go through sort of classical theater history training, Aphra Behn becomes a name that that you're taught, right? But I agree, beyond a few sort of little points of knowledge, the plays don't get produced very much nowadays. This is by far the best known of all of her plays in 20th and 21st century. And I think she did, in fact, create a pathway for female right. I mean, what Virginia Woolf had to say is absolutely right. She is incredibly important. And so I think it is important for us to do work by someone this important and bring that work to the audience's understanding, and to have the conversations about the yuck factor in the play, and to have conversations about how the play reflects on current situations in our own world that are yucky, that maybe aren't being called yucky enough.
Yes.
And if you've got an Andrew Tate like character in the play, maybe we can look at that in a different time period and go, that's yucky. Oh, maybe it's always yucky. Maybe that's something we shouldn't be supporting even today.
The manosphere.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Quick story for you just about me sort of finding this play. Again, I was taught it and I read it when I was an undergrad, right? It sounds like you had the same experience. We were probably learning from the same sort of group of textbooks. And I remember being struck by how strong the characters were. But, it didn't really stay with me very much. But I was leading a study abroad trip to London about 10 years ago. and a university theater company was producing the Rover while I was there. And they were doing so in a really interesting and unique way. They were doing it at a world historical site where the audience moved with the play. So different scenes of the play took place. So it took place in Hampton Court Palace, outside of London, and you moved all through the palaces while these scenes were taking place, and they took place in stairways, and they took place in whatever. But I remember just being enthralled by the play, the way it was produced at that time period. And since that production 10 years ago, it stuck with me that I wanted to do something with it. So the fact that we're finally getting that opportunity makes me really happy.
Yeah, that's so, I mean, I I love how we are taking these plays and then producing them, finding ways to make people see how relevant they are. Because it's not that we have to make them relevant, they already are. It's just getting past the barriers that people seem to set up where they're like classical and I'm out. You know, it's like classical
Right.
music where they're like, oh, that doesn't exist anymore. People don't make classical music. I have to go listen to Mozart. And you're like, no, no, that people still make classical music.
Yeah.
What?
Right.
Or you say
Right.
classical and it feels like people just go vacant, where they're like,
Right.
so it's old. So it's for, you know, so I don't want to watch this, as opposed to recognizing how powerful it still is. And I think
Well,
experiences like that take people out of the
well,
stagness.
and and I think one of the things about having been involved with a number of classical theater companies over the years that I think there is real value. Not every play that was written 400 years ago is good. In fact, a lot of them are bad. The bad ones don't tend to the bad ones tend to be forgotten. In fact, the bad ones quite literally are forgotten. Like we oftentimes don't have records of them. The classical plays that we're doing today, if you are at all a thoughtful classical theater artist, you are always asking, what does this play say about today? How does this play confer with today? And sometimes you have to sometimes if you get some critical distance from a difficult topic, you can see it more clearly. Does that make any sort of sense?
It
Like,
does.
I think sometimes if you want to talk about, it's so funny in a day and an age where we're sort of, taking books off of library shelves because they're so, um, classical theater can say all of those things, but say it in a way that you can hear it without being offended by it in the way that you maybe have a knee-jerk reaction to, or can just have that one critical step back away from it to be able to go, oh, I really see what this moment is now, in a way where I don't have to be personally have all the agita about it.
Yeah.
So again, I think if it's classical, somebody thinks it's got relevance for today, and and they aren't picking it because it's old. They're picking it because it's really good and has stood the test of time. And I think every generation with Shakespeare finds themselves in it, right? You look at the Shakespeare that was produced in the 60s in America, and that generation, those politics found themselves in those plays, just as they have, I think, for 400 years.
And we're doing Julius Caesar at OSP this summer. I can't imagine how that could be relevant.
Oh, yeah, God, help us all. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
But yeah, and I love what you said about the discussions that come after it. I think that's also really important and something we forget about.
Yeah.
You know, I've heard people, even Disney movies, right? Like Frozen, where the parent-child relationship is kind of messed up. And you're
Yeah.
like, have a conversation. You don't just have to like ban that movie from ever showing. have a conversation, but it seems like we just want the easy way out of just taking it off the watch list or taking it off the bookshelves, rather than having the difficult conversations that would allow us to expand our worldview. And I think that's a big problem, and that's something that theater always kind of pushes. Even if you're having a conversation between you and the stage, where like you're thinking through it as it's being shown,
Right.
it's the same thing. It's
Right.
forcing you or asking. I'll be nice. It's asking you to have a conversation.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you.
So hopefully, all of my listeners, you will take the agency to get your tickets to this reading of the Rover.
Right.
And that is coming up in April. Can you give
April 10th, 11th, and 12th. There are 3 performances, 2 evenings, a Friday and a Saturday, and a 2 o'clock on a Sunday. Tickets are limited. There are only about 60 seats in the theater. So if you want to get tickets, come. The reading series is significantly cheaper than the main stage indoor series is. So it's a chance for you to get indoors and see the beautiful indoor theater at Oklahoma Shakespeare in the Park. And there's some incredibly cool music. If you're an aficionado of beach music or music of the mid 80s, you should come just for that. I've got
You're
some
gonna have to
treats.
send me that playlist. I'm gonna
Yeah,
need
yeah,
that.
yeah. Yeah, I've got 2 or 3 that I'm toying with still, but it's pretty close to being done, and it's rock and roll, right? I mean,
yeah.
I've got Cyndi Lauper, I've got Madonna. I found a way to get one of my favorite female artists of the time period, Susie and the Banshees, into the Playwrights, a little more punky. My vibe was punk. So
What's the song? I'll look it up. And
yeah,
I'll
yeah.
put it on the bottom in case anybody wants to listen to it.
Yeah. I'll tell you what. I sent you a script. As soon as I've got the playlist done, I'll send you that too.
Okay. And I'll let you guys all listen to it and tell us what you think. But yeah, it sounds like a really fun show. And then the beard is looking great, Prospero. You're getting ready for the Tempest.
Thank you. I'm working on forking it now so that I can get the sort of, it's going to be, I don't know, I'm going to weave some seashells into it or something. I haven't quite got it. Yeah.
So we've got the reading. We've got another reading after this one, how to write a Regency novel.
Right.
And then
how to write a Regency romance.
Romance. Sorry.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
I forgot the romance part.
Yeah.
Romance. And then the first summer show is The Tempest, right?
It is, yes. Tempest is opening in, I think it's the 11th of July.
It's gonna be warm, but at least this time you don't have to wear a fat suit.
Yes, it is. But it'll be fun. And seeing a show out at Oklahoma Shakes in the outdoor theater is an incredibly comfortable experience, even on the hot days. Bring your blanket, bring a bottle of wine,
pizza. Michelle and I always grab a pizza and then
grab a pizza next door and run over and absolutely. It's a really intimate experience back there. The actors are in the audience and around. The sound is great.
And that's what's so cool about the indoor theater too, is like it's different kinds of intimacy, but the indoor theater also provides one, you're getting those different viewpoints depending on where you're sitting.
Right.
But you're so close to the stage. Whereas the outdoor one, you're a little bit further away, but you're literally having them walk. They're among you.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Who knows what Ariel's going to be up to?
I have no idea yet, but with David Weber directing, I expect it will be something pretty magnificent and crazy. So.
Well, I still hope that we get a chance to meet up somewhere in Europe this summer. But
yes, yeah.
Such a pleasure to talk to you, and
such a pleasure talking to you.
Pick your brain about everything, and I'm so excited for the choices you made. They're so fun. This is just going to be, I think it's going to give that experience that you had to somebody else, and
I hope so. That's the goal. And then the actors are all students in my program, so it really there's the other side of the advantage, which is that these are actors training to do this, and they're exactly the right age to be doing a play like this. Play feels like a play for them, and there'll be a ton of joy, I think, in watching them play.
Yeah. And for those of you who are thinking, oh, it's just a reading, let me just tell you, the Shakespeare group in Chicago used to do performances at I think they still do, at the Huntington Library,
Right.
and they blew my mind. I would drive from Purdue to Huntington because they were amazing. And I have no doubt that this production is going to be just as fabulous and cheaper. So for those of you who are like, oh, budgeting, hey, this is a really good experience and a fun opportunity to get some spring break in the spring.
There you go. Great.
All right, everybody. Well, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thanks again, Lance. And just remember, all the world's a stage, and you too can be a shrew. Bye.